Well, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Andrew Levitas. He is the writer and director for quite a phenomenal film, actually, Minamata. Um, Congratulations on the film. It is fantastic. Um,
Yeah.
and I want and it's interesting because for me personally, it comes at a very um a perfect point in my life because I just started a new job as a news photographer a couple of months ago. And I actually studied black and white photography. So it just putting it all together, it was a really wonderful experience. So thank you for that.
No, thank you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the film?
Sure. It's sort of it's there's a lot here to unpack, but kind of the short version
Mhm.
is film takes place in the early 70s between New York and Minamata, Japan, where a large corporation had determined that um, the parts per million, or the sacrifice of the parts per million as it pertains to human beings, justified the economic gain that they could have in poisoning a local fishing community, and that the thousands of deformed children and destroyed lives was worth it. And unfortunately, the Japanese government also thought it was worth it and supported them and didn't get in the way and didn't protect its citizens. And it's an unfortunate story that is occurring daily around the world
Mhm.
today in the States and everywhere else, and very relatable in that way. But at the core of it, you have a community of people that just said enough is enough, and not just stood up for themselves in the toughest of circumstances, but also did it against societal norms. Because in particular in Japan, there was quite a lot of shame in this area, and so they stood up in the most heroic way possible. And if there's a takeaway from their story, for me, it's that if these folks can stand up for what's right, then we all can stand up for what's right, because there's no one that's got a tougher circumstance
Mhm.
than what happened there. And at the center of it, or I guess really on the periphery and documenting it, and why I was so attracted to this story that I think could have an incredibly positive benefit to the world and to people, and feel uplifting and inspiring, um, and could give a voice and maybe make a difference, was the fact that Eugene Smith, this incredible uh, historical photographer, uh, sort of his last mission. And in fact, it was a mission he didn't even want. He was ready to
Mhm.
off himself. He was done. But he kind of on his last legs goes to Minamata to document and to meet this community. And like he did with all of his stories, he embedded himself with the community so that he could find the essential truth. It wasn't enough to snap some photos, but he needed to understand and get into it in order to find those moments, and also gain the trust of the community. Um, and for me as a filmmaker, that allowed something very special, because Gene Smith had the ability to see the most positive and best elements of humanity reflected in those darkest elements of humanity. Now, he was able to do it in one photo. He could show you a image of a GI pulling out a baby from the rubble, and the smile and the love that soldier would have had for that child. Or in this instance, a woman in a bathtub with a horribly deformed child, and being able to not focus on the horrors of man, but actually see that the light of man, that the love
Mhm.
and the hope and the compassion that the mother could show to the child would completely blow the darkness out of it. It somehow is an uplifting photo instead of being something that's devastating. You lean in to look at it. And because you had this lens, I could make a creative film that was uplifting and exciting and inspiring and beautiful. As an artist yourself, you know, it's not enough to document, right? You need people to
Mhm.
look. And how do they look? They look if you can touch them, and they look if you can make it attractive. Things that are not attractive to look at. It's not just composition, right? It's what's screaming off the page, what's pouring out into their hearts. How do they make that connection? And Gene had that. And so Gene only had one frame to use. I, of course, had millions of frames to use, and he had black and white, and I had color. So there's quite a lot that I was able to do to try to come close to the impact, at least in terms of the work that he would have achieved.
Yeah, and I really appreciated that about the film was the fact that it was a story that I wasn't necessarily familiar with of what happened in Japan in the 70s, but being able to take that journey with him and then watching him document it and how he documented it, kind of like as you're saying with that eye, uh really made it not only as gaining knowledge about some of the things that are happening, but also just like you're talking about, just the beauty in how a community overcomes it, and despite still fighting it, they're figuring out ways to live.
That's right.
And you captured that very, very well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Um,
And to love, right? To live, but live, not survive, right? But live,
right.
right? To really live, to still go like, this is my chance. I'm going to love my child. I'm going to love my thing. I'm going to put my anger and hate over here just for a minute so that I can live and be better.
And I think that's part of the magic of that photograph in particular, is that despite the horrible condition that um this mercury has caused, there's love there, and that's what stands out the most. And so I think that um black and white photography is such an art, I think, because it really takes away any kind of distractions, that
100%.
are in color, that are just it really comes down to just the raw image, the emotion. And if you have the right eye behind it, like a Eugene Smith, you're going to be able to tell an amazing story with one frame.
That's right. And it's the lightness and the darkness, right? I mean, like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a reason that even superhero movies, right? I mean, I'm not that kind of filmmaker, but even superhero movies, what are they about? I mean, they're too black and white, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the good guy and the bad guy and the arch villain and all this stuff. But it's the world we're living in. I mean, like there are, but with black and white photography, like there are shades of gray, right? But it's all on that spectrum. And it reminds you, I think, that, you can be anywhere on the spectrum as an individual, right? Like you can be gray in the middle, you could be white and a source of light for yourself and for others, just by making a choice, right? Like it's a struggle to survive in this world, but you can make that choice to be a source of light. Or you can go all the way the other way, and go into the darkness. And it's so clear in that kind of photography. Even when you take a picture of your kids, you're like, the shadow in the tree, it reads that way.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And to pull this off, you have a phenomenal story, and you have the characters that are based in reality. Of course, you need an amazing cast, which you do. And the thing is, when I went into the film, besides knowing that Johnny Depp was in it, I didn't really read into who else was in the film. So as different protagonists, different characters showed up, I was very, very pleasantly surprised, and I was just amazed at the talent that you have. Talk a little bit about working with them.
sure. So, parking Johnny for a second, who's brilliant in the film, um, at least I think so. You know, when you make a film like this, you attract a very specific kind of artist, you know, kind of artist that cares enough to give their time. It's not a movie that, these artists aren't getting paid a bunch of money. They're
Mm-hmm.
doing it for the love of the game, for the love of the craft, and for the love of the subject. So you're going to get the best out of them also. When you make a film, international, as an American, I'm saying international, but international um, actors are really, and voices are really underserved in our country and everywhere else, right? And so what happens is when you get the gift of making a film where you can hire international actors, right? They're not just, American actors that but you can
Mm-hmm.
go to a place like Japan and go, I want, I want the best actors for these roles. Our cast, if you're in Japan and Japanese cinema, I mean, it's the equivalent of, I have a film with Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Daniel Day-Lewis, Al Pacino, like it's the greatest hits. No ego on these sets, total commitment, total passion for the idea, the subject, the reason to do it. As a filmmaker, it's you've got the greatest paintbrushes imaginable, and also you're getting to bring those people to a new audience. Guys, actors like Jun Kunimura, who's one of the great living actors. Like 99.9% of America, probably more than that, will have never heard of him, right? They might have seen his face in one or two films or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
but he's not been given a chance to be to breathe life into something as nuanced as he does as the head of Chisso in the film. You know, I hope that audiences get to enjoy seeing him, because that in itself is a gift. You know, they're not watching Japanese language movies, generally American audiences, and to see someone like that and realize, wow, you know, these are you know, some of the greatest living artists. So it's pretty. It was just such great fortune to do it.
Yeah, actually, he was one of the ones that stood out to me fairly quickly when I saw him as the head of the corporation. And I think that's really the magic of indie films, and why I love it, and I love to cover films like this, because there's so much passion into it. And by no means am I throwing shade at big box office films and things like that, because you know, studios got to make money, and so they're gonna go for whatever their focus groups say, or what, you know, whatever the boardroom says. But in a film like this, where you just have a group of artists with, you know, with you and with the producers and with the actors, you guys are really creating something special, something that means a lot to you. And sometimes it's with budget constraints, time constraints, and like you said, a lot of people working for the love of the genre, not for the paycheck.
That's right. Well, nobody here is working for the paycheck. And we had all of those constraints, but they don't feel like things you get angry about. They feel like things to work around and to work through, and to use to your advantage in some way. Okay, so I can't shoot, I don't have a helicopter. Well, I'll figure it out. I'll do something else. You know, like, how do you make it more intimate? How do you focus on that? And you know, and the other thing is that for these actors, and I should say for the crew, you make films like this, you know, if you have a child or you have something, you know, when my child is of the age that I could show this to them, if I'd made a film like this and I'd made a super straight ahead studio film that's the focus groups and all the things, it's not representational of us. So if I had those two films, even if that one made $1 billion and was Spider-Man, the first thing I want to show my kid, the thing I really want to show my kid, is this, right? Is Minamata. And that's the same for all of the actors, all of the artists behind the camera. And that is really the beauty of the thing. Like, we all became artists to make this film, not to make the other things. We love the other things too, by the way. I'm a consumer of those, but this is the reason we got into it. At least when you see these kinds of films, the people that are in it, they're in it because they want to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to watch it. I want to see that passion on screen. I have to ask, I am a big fan of Johnny Depp, and I think that one of the things that stands out to me is how he gets lost in the role. There's certain actors that sometimes you know them by name, and they almost kind of have a stamp on what their character is going to be like, their personality, just because their stardom kind of outshines the character. And somehow I find that Depp is able to really immerse himself in the character enough where the character outshines the actor.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that has been the case for Johnny throughout his career, with some exception, but throughout his career. However, I think that as he's becoming older and choosing differently, certainly in this film, you know, Johnny has less makeup on in this movie than in any film probably he's ever done, right? Even like Donnie Brasco, there probably was more stuff. He was just clean shaven with his hair back. You know, there's less stuff here hiding Johnny. In fact, I think that this is the most open and the most honest of or transparent version of himself that you're seeing here, right? And what's interesting is that he's unrecognizable in the film, and people keep saying that, but I don't think it's because he has a beard, right? I think it's because you're just not used to seeing it. He's unrecognizable in his spirit. You know, he's transformed from the inside here. It's not a pirate hat. It's not an accent. It's none of those things. It's all the rest inside of him is the thing that is transforming what you see. You know, it's so interesting. I love seeing, obviously, I like you, I'm a photographer. I like looking at photographs. And I always find it interesting how you can look at a photograph of a person and then see them in a different context, right? And then you're like, it's not the same person. I've seen 50 photos of them, And I think they look like this. And then you see them in different contexts and they look a totally different way. You're like, they're unrecognizable as the same person. I think with Johnny, he's so identifiable that what he's done here by bringing so much of Smith inside of him, just who he is without any, he's not doing any facial expressions. He's not trying anything on. He's just genuinely being this person after doing all the work. I think that is what the transformation is. And it reads so difficult. It's kind of, it reminds me, but the other one had a lot of shtick. I remember, do you remember Sean Penn and Carlito's Way?
Yes, I do. Mm-hmm.
And you're like, who was that guy? Like, who played the redhead guy? Like, who was that? Who was the lawyer? And you're like, oh, that was Sean Penn. He was like, you know, but actually, once you know that and you look at a snapshot of Penn in that, you're like, okay, fine. So he had like a perm, but you're like, that's Sean. Like, it's so clear that it's Sean Penn, but as a character, he's so far from what you expect, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a bit of what you get with Johnny here. There's no prosthetic nose. There's no like accoutrement. Like he's just, by the way, he's wearing normal clothes like that anyone would wear. So it's quite interesting in that way.
Yeah. So I want to ask you before I let you go about some of your choices for shots. I found it really interesting how a lot of times when he's at work, I'm talking about Eugene. We go from kind of seeing his point of view to the camera point of view and back and forth. Tell me about choosing those shots, and was it challenging for you to make a movie about somebody who's really capturing moments and how to translate that to an audience?
Sure. We worked really hard. My DOP, Benoit Delhomme, really my partner, my brother, to create a strategy where we could educate our audience in sort of our language, right? And how could we do that? And Smith's language, right? How could we do that in fairly efficient way that felt digestible and honest? Because most people are not like you and have never picked up a film camera or any camera besides their cell phone probably in their lives. And so how can we do that? And so we built a strategy in just sort of, especially in the first, third of the film, where we start to give you that language. And so you see more of it in the beginning, but as we progress, we come away from it a bit. And in doing that, it was a wonderful challenge, but also we had the help of a movie star who was willing to not be on camera all the time and be the star. It's so unique to go to a guy at Johnny's level that's used to being, the camera's always pointed at Johnny. In any other movies he's ever made, the camera's always pointed at him. In many ways, this film, like Johnny is our camera, right? Like Gene is the camera. And so oftentimes, especially now, if you were to go back and watch the movie, Benoit, my cinematographer, who's also holding the camera, is actually Gene in many of these scenes, right? And when you watch the film, you go, gosh, Johnny's like, he's everywhere, right? But if you were actually now to go back without trying to, without letting yourself get into the movie and just watch it objectively as a student or in this way and looking for this, you'll realize that he's off screen quite a bit. And like, he has no lines. He has like 3 lines in the last 20 minutes of the film, but he's so present because he's always in the room, but oftentimes we're him. And that melding of things would only be possible if you had an actor that was willing to go, I'm not the star. Like, the movie's the star. These people are the star. It's a very generous thing for a guy like that to do, because he had to be there. It wasn't like, oh, well, you only need to work 2 weeks and you don't have to be there. Like, it's not that kind of, you're not, like, he's in the room, he's in the scene, he's doing the thing, he's there presently because we need him on the other side of the shot, but you're not going like this.
Yeah, it was done very, very well, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today. I could talk this film for a lot longer actually, but we got other things we got to get into, unfortunately, and you have a lot more interviews. Before I let you go, February 11th on theaters.
February 11th in theaters. Like, please get out there and check it out. This is a movie that's made to be seen with others. So, there's things to talk about, there's things to be inspired about, and, walking out of a movie theater after seeing something that touches you and feeling the air and the breeze and the wind or the sun or the cold night, you know, that feeling, like that was in our minds as we were making this film. I want you to feel alive after you see this film. So, you know, in a few months, if you need to curl up on a couch under a blanket and watch the movie, God bless you. But I think the best experience on this one really is going to the cinema.
Yep, this is a lot of levels in it. This is definitely not what I call a Capri Sun film that you can just inhale. You have great topics when it comes to, you know, industrial pollution, which you can start a great conversation. You have the celebration of the life of an amazing photographer that was Eugene Smith. And at the end of the day, when you know, when you watch a movie, it's to be entertained. So you get a lot there, a lot of value. So
Thank you so much.
it was really nice to virtually meet you, and I hope to get to talk to you again on another film.
Likewise,
All right,
likewise.
take care.
Later, man.